Morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. Good morning. It is Friday. It's such a beautiful Friday morning here in the ATL. What is the date? I never know. It's the 22nd, November 22nd. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Let me see where my trusty co-host is this morning. Lots going on, everybody. Let's see where he is. Let's see. There
Hey,
he is. Good morning, David.
morning, Tamara.
Good
How are you
morning.
doing today?
I'm good. I missed you last week. You and Nina killed it, though. That
Oh,
conversation was great.
yeah, it's great fun talking to her. She's it's relaxing. She really thinks clearly and out loud, and she's always got something really insightful to say. So, really pleasant.
And the fact that she was a white woman at Tennessee State, oh my gosh, that conversation could have gone. I had
Yeah,
so many questions on the back end I wanted to ask, and hopefully we'll have her back so we can talk about what it was like to be white at a Black university. I'm sure she has some amazing stories to tell. So
yeah,
we'll have to have her back.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
Well, our
Okay.
guest is here, Mr. Chris from California, Mr.
Hey,
ADOS Sacramento.
Sacramento in the house, ADOS.
Sacramento. Good
We lit.
morning.
We litty early in the morning.
Early in the morning, because it's like 3 hours behind there. It's eight
Yeah,
o'clock.
yeah. It's breakfast time. Hey, King wants to say good morning too. This is
Good
King.
morning, Mr. King.
King wants to say good morning. Get down, buddy. Get down.
ADS, ADOS, ADOS.
That's right.
What's
That's
going
right. That's
on
right.
with our movement?
It is. It is. Yes. 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 Um, yeah, I mean, so first, let me, I want to say thank you again to you, Tamara and David. Hello once again, but thank y'all both, but especially to you, Tamara, for your continued sharing of your platform and using your platform to spread the hashtag ADOS message, and also to push for real Black ADOS political power where you are. Shout out to you, and congratulations on your run for the Senate. All right.
United States Senate, here we come. United States Senate, here we come.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things I wanted to talk about too, which I think you're a really, really great example of, which is one of the best things I think about the hashtag ADOS movement is that we are seeing people empowered in their own communities to organize, to run for office, to advocate, to get involved politically. And that is, I think, transformation. I think, in a lot of ways, we haven't been as political as we need to be. And I think this movement has rejuvenated and sort of reinvigorated that political spirit, in our community. I think you're a great example of that. You're obviously doing big things, running for, the Senate. But we've got other candidates, other hashtag ADOS candidates all around the country. We've got, but not only people just running for office too, right? But we've got people like organizing in their communities. We've actually seen an explosion of grassroots community organizing and activism as it relates to this movement. There are probably some 30 different groups in 30 different states that have been organizing around the hashtag ADOS movement just starting this year, basically. And there's more coming. And that's, I think, an important development that I don't think, is catching a lot of attention or getting a lot of attention. But I think it's one of the most important developments that we've seen so far.
I'm so proud. 400 years, but we're here. We're here. This
We
is
hear.
this is a moment in time, and this is us making history. And we're not going anywhere. We're not going to be silenced. We're fighting, and we're going to get reparations is real, and it has to happen. We're not going to. You cannot tell us no. It will happen.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I think you're seeing that determination and will play itself out in a number of different spaces. Like I said, people are getting involved, locally, but people are serious, right? People are serious about this fight. Reparations is the cornerstone of the hashtag ADOS agenda. Reparations for ADOS is the cornerstone of the hashtag ADOS agenda. You can read more about it at www.ados101.com, or you can join, more than 2,000 ADOS Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. at Breaking Brown and Tone Talks on YouTube, and see how much, a part of what this movement is about is reparations for ADOS. And when we talk about reparations, right, we're really talking about a set of policies that compensate for some grievous injustice, right? That's the basic definition of reparations. In our case, we're talking about specific redress, acknowledgement, and closure, as a result of the period of slavery, the period of Jim Crow, and the period of now. So it's slavery, Jim Crow, and now. It's 3 phases, right? And this is at the core of what we're fighting for as a movement. You've seen this play out on the national stage, and we've got candidates up and down the ballot really talking about what their position is on reparations. Some have better positions than others. This week we saw the newest entry into the presidential race, Deval Patrick, out of Massachusetts, and Deval, for what it's worth, fumbled the ball right out of the gate. Most politicians are smart enough right now to say, I would at least sign HR 40, even though right now HR 40 is in really, really bad shape, right? So, but most politicians have sort of wised up to say, hey, I at least need to say that, right? And we've also seen a bunch of new co-sponsors and co-signers on HR 40. But Mr. Patrick, he comes into the race and says, I won't even sign that. So yeah, that's a non-starter, right? If you're running for president, you need to be supportive of reparations for ADOS. And to be honest, I will sign HR 40 is not a sufficient answer to that question, right? Because we know that HR 40 has a lot of problems. There are a bunch of revisions that people have proposed, people like Dr. William Sandy Darity, a bunch of revisions. Antonio Moore has a few revisions also. So, you must be supportive of reparations if you're going to get my vote at the presidential level, right? And if you don't support reparations for ADOS, and if you don't have a specific targeted agenda for ADOS, then you won't get my support. If you don't support me, you can't ask me to support you, right? That's just fairness, right? That's just the reality of politics. If you want something from me, I need something from you. And what I will do if we don't see a specific targeted agenda that includes reparations from any of the presidential candidates, what I'm going to do is what people like Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore and even Dr. Eddie Glaude had been proposing for years, which is to show up to the polls and vote down ballot. I'm going to show up and vote down. I'm going to write in ADOS at the top of the ticket, and I'm going to vote down ballot. And if I can't find any candidates down the ballot that I can support, I'm going to vote ADOS in each one of those 2. Okay. So you're familiar with this, right? This is very similar to the Withhold the Vote campaign, which you pioneered and made, laid the foundation for, right? And so what we're seeing now is people, catching up to where you are, basically, Tamara.
And Withhold the Vote never said, and they tried to point it back at me as if I was telling people not to vote. That's not what it meant. It meant we're holding those accountable. We're going to hold you accountable. If you don't have an agenda specific to us, skip you.
Exactly.
Skip you.
Exactly. And that's just good politics, right? That's just good politics. And we've been supportive of the Democratic Party, in mass for 60, 70 years, right? And we've gotten very, very little for it. And we've actually gotten bad things for it too, right? Our community has continued to suffer, and continue to hurt. The lineage wealth gap has grown over the course of Democratic presidents and Republican presidents. If you look at the tenure of Mr. Obama, ADOS wealth declined significantly under Mr. Obama. We had Black home ownership go down to near historic, if not historic lows, right? And the trend has continued under Mr. Trump, right? You can say the same thing for Mr. Bush and Mr. Clinton and Mr. Other Bush, right? And Reagan, right? So, I mean, you can go back and back and back and back, and you can see that we have gotten the short end of the stick every single time with every single president. And what our generation is doing and what this movement is doing, this is one of the best things about the hashtag ADOS movement, is that it's bringing ADOS across the age spectrum, across the political spectrum, across the gender spectrum, across the education spectrum. I mean, it really is a unifying concept and a unifying principle to say, hey, we are bonded by our lineage, one, right? We are American descendants of slavery. We are those whose ancestors were enslaved in the United States by the United States. We have a specific justice claim. That justice claim includes reparations, but it also includes the demand for a specific targeted ADOS agenda. That is what our generation is doing. That is what our generation is saying. And it's millennials, it's zillennials, it's Gen Xers, it's boomers, and it's everybody in between, right? And I think we've seen and had great success so far, actually, in moving this conversation forward and actually making the government respond. The government hasn't responded in the ways that we want them to yet, but they're inching closer and closer. And that's a positive development. We will continue to put pressure on our politicians and government officials. We will up the pressure on our politicians and government officials. We're going to take this message and are taking this message locally into our communities, applying the same principles and same concepts to local politicians and local government officials. The same rules apply. If you don't have an agenda specific to our community, let's say here in Sacramento, let's say you're running for local office here in Sac, right? You're running for mayor, you're running for city council, you're running for school board. If you don't have an agenda specific to ADOS in Sacramento, you cannot expect our vote. Simple as that. And I think folks are saying the same thing to politicians in every single community they're in. Like I said, over 30 different states now have some sort of ADOS present. That's over half the country. Okay, in 6 months, 7 months, right? This movement has expanded from the air, right, into the ground and into the soil and into the roots of ADOS communities nationwide, and it's only growing.
Viral. We're here. This thing is spreading like a virus. We're not playing.
Yeah.
David is sitting there taking all kinds of notes. David.
Let's go, David.
Well, I guess you're asking for some comments. We had a little bit of a discussion, Tamara and I, yesterday about how European Americans should listen to this conversation, which is a conversation that is an internal conversation,
David, excuse me, David, you're tapping because I can see your camera moving. Now don't. Okay. Go ahead, you're good. I know when you're tapping on that desk. Camera shaking, but go ahead.
So we are European Americans are listening in on a conversation that's being had, and I think that my suggestions have to do with what approach we should take as listeners to this conversation, and that's I think a premise. That's just a starting point for where we go to create a dialogue, create a secondary conversation, right? So that's one part. The other thing is that I've mentioned this before, that how can European Americans stop thinking and acting white around this issue? And
Chris thinks that's funny.
rather to think of themselves as as other parts of their identity, and particularly their our identity as working people. And if we consider the fact that and I don't think that the Africans who came to the mainland Anglo-American colonies in 1619 were particularly were assigned to the category of enslaved hereditary bond servitude right away. That what do you call it? That framework for the exploitation of labor really evolved over the next 75 years or so. And I think that's really an important consideration. In other words, if you look at the history, master work history by Theodore William Allen called The Invention of the White Race, he talks about how, and he looked at the legislature, the House of Burgesses, and every county record, for 100 years. He found that this system of a white race, the term itself didn't exist until the end of the 17th century. So there's a lot to unpack there. But I would just say that this structure was worked out over a period of 60, 70 years, and included a point at which there was a revolution in the Virginia plantation colony in 1676, 100 years before the Declaration of Independence.
So David, let's go back to the top of your question. How is it that white America and white people, how do they digest this? Because you and I, when we talked about this yesterday, we talked about how they have to do two things at the same time. And that is, they're going to have to just listen and not do anything. And then when it's time to do something, then they have to be prepared to do it.
They have to be prepared, and they also have to learn how to relate to this, this movement and this set of demands. And one of the ways, the reason I was bringing up all of that history is because for most European Americans, even today, their status within the society is that they're working people, and as such, their labor is exploited by the capitalist class. And if we are thinking about what happened to African American enslaved people from the period of the late 17th century down to the emancipation at the end of the Civil War, it was 175 plus years of working for bosses without getting paid.
So what you're saying is that there has to be a correlation between what white America experienced and what we experience.
Yes, and on the top end of it is the issue of European American working people abandoning their kind of their solidarity with African American enslaved people. Now, there were abolitionists. There were people who participated in attempting to, break this and what we're learning now is the abolitionist movement was centrally, was African Americans.
So before you go too far into the history, yeah. I want Chris to chime back in, because I think the data today is so relevant that I'm gonna tell you that when you try to have this conversation when you go too deep, David, you lose people.
Let me add just one thing. The one thing is that there's one half of the working class that was getting paid. The other half was not getting paid. That half of the working class that was getting paid had an obligation, and still has an obligation to act in solidarity and to work together with ADOS folks to rectify that situation. I mean, there's no point in using that word solidarity without that. Okay.
So Chris, give us some data, Chris, because I think the data today speaks volumes about where we are.
Yes, and actually, just want to pick up on the last point that David made. Actually, you're absolutely right, David. It comes down to a question of what does solidarity really mean, right? What does solidarity really mean to you, right? Ally, right? What does it really mean to be an ally and to be in solidarity with people who you may end up not being able to relate to in all the ways in which you think you should, right? Do you require that, right? What are the terms of solidarity? That's, I think, a fundamental question. We've been exploring that. I keep bringing up Yvette Carnell, who has a show Mondays and Wednesdays, 7 p.m. at Breaking Brown on YouTube. That's the hub for #ADOS political education. And we've talked about this extensively. What does it mean to be an ally, right? What are the terms of solidarity, of coalitions, right? And we've talked about how there must be a mutual, reciprocal relationship. I got to get something for it. It has to go both ways. And what we've seen historically and even now is that it doesn't go both ways. It's y'all support us to get what we want, and then we move on, and you don't get anything, or you get the short end of the stick, or that's another way of saying a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Right. That's sort of another example of that. But I think you're right. You're touching on something that's absolutely very important, right? What are the terms of allyship, of solidarity? And then also, what is the role of a good white ally or a good non-ADOS ally, right? What is the role? And I think we're still negotiating that. But what I think this movement has done is reset the terms, right? We've hit the reset button in many ways, right? And we're saying, now, if you want solidarity and if you want to be in solidarity, these are the terms and conditions under which that happens. No more do we just support because, right? And no more will we allow ourselves to be used as the doormats or as the stepping stones for non-ADOS groups to achieve some sort of political end and aim based on the struggle that ADOS fought and won in the first place. We see this playing out now with the Civil Rights Act of 1866, right? Last week, we had ADOS from about 5 different states converge on Washington, D.C. for the second time this year, right? For the second time this year, ADOS from about 5 different states converged on Washington, D.C. to save the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Now, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 does not say ADOS in it, right? That is a protection that is the result of ADOS struggle, right? It is the consequence of ADOS struggle. It wouldn't be there without ADOS, right? But it protects every single American, right? It protects every single American. Where was the solidarity last week? Where is the solidarity? Hey, chill, man. Sorry, my dog is bugging. Where is the solidarity? Okay. Where were the allies last week, right? Where is the outcry from the non-ADOS community to save the Civil Rights Act? So, in such an important case and context, I expect to see allies screaming from the rooftops, running out in front, running into interference when we're being attacked for defending the Civil Rights Act, right? So what is solidarity? What is real solidarity? What are the terms of our allyship? What are the terms of any coalition building going forward? And I think this movement has been transformational because it has allowed us to hit the reset button and actually establish the terms on our own terms. That's power. That's a taking of power. All right. This movement at its core is also about power, right? It's about political power. Okay? That's very, very important. But let's get to the data really, really quickly, right? So, I actually had a conversation yesterday with you familiar with the Wellstone Progressives, right? Right? They're left, democratic socialist type, right? So I had a meeting yesterday with a member of the local Wellstone Progressives group, and we were talking about the ADOS movement and what solidarity actually meant, right? We were talking on a local level. They're interested in pushing something called participatory budgeting locally, where local people have power over the local budgets in their communities. That's something that's very interesting to me personally as someone who's ADOS here in Sacramento, right? But so we were having this great conversation, right? And we were talking about we were defining the terms of our potential solidarity in real time, and then we got to the question of class and sort of what some real solutions are. And I had to tell him that last time we looked, a white household where the head of the household dropped out of high school has more wealth than the ADOS household where the head of the household has a college degree. A white household where the head of the household is unemployed has more wealth than an ADOS household where the head of the household is working full time, right? That speaks to class, right? Because if class was at the root of what we're talking about, that is not something you would see. That's not something you expect to see. You would expect to see that more incomes, higher income will correlate to higher wealth, regardless of the racial, breakdown, right? But that's not what we see in real life. I propose to my white allies and to other allies that we also use the framing of a debt, right? This is a debt that's owed, right? Regardless of whether or not you think, you can relate to Chris, who is working full time and right, whether or not you think you can relate to my struggle, right? That's important. But what's also important is that our country pay its debts. Okay? And the American government, the US government, owes a tremendous debt to ADOS. And it's morally right to pay your debts, right? That's something that we value, right? If you have a debt, you pay it. And so that's a framing and a framework that I also propose to our non-ADOS allies, right? Use that in your work too, right? And use the data, use the information, right? Talk numbers, right? Talk stories and talk numbers. It's powerful when you hear and when you see the real data in real life. That's powerful, right? And I think that would be powerful in any sort of allies doing any kind of work on behalf of this movement. Last thing I'll say on this is one of the great things about this movement is that we are, in a sense, destroying the concept of whiteness. Okay. Now, I wouldn't necessarily use that in your in your ally work, David. Okay, I wouldn't necessarily use that framing. That's the framing we use, right? But we're talking about lineage here. We're not talking about race. To be quite honest, right? Race is a social construct, right? And there's all kinds of we can go into that. But we're talking about lineage. Okay. We're not making a claim based on race. We're not making a claim based on the color of somebody's skin. Okay. We're making a claim based on who you descend from. Who you is what we say, right? Hashtag who you. Who's your daddy? Who's your mama? Who's your mama's mama? Who's your daddy's daddy? Right? Do you descend from the killing fields of the American South? Do you descend from the plantations? Do you descend from American slavery, the institution of slavery? And one thing I want to point out, just to be really fast, ADOS is an acronym for American Descendants of Slavery, not American Descendants of Slaves. I think that's something that people get, sort of confused about. But that's what we're talking about, lineage. We're not talking about race here. We're talking about a debt, and we're talking about a debt that's owed and must be repaid with interest.
And that seals the deal. And that's why we're fighting. That's why we're doing all that we're doing. And Chris, I want to thank you for being
thank you.
You are. I mean, I just want to say thank you. This is a lot of work organizing. This is a lot of work.
I'm having a time of my life. I'm having a time of my life. I don't want to do anything else. I tell people, I feel like I found my calling. I feel like I found my life's work. The upliftment and betterment of ADOS, is all I want to do. It's all I care about. It's all I do. Everything I do in my life is devoted in some way to justice for ADOS. And I couldn't, and I'm always humbled to have the opportunity to be on platforms like this and with speaking with great people like yourself and David, and just working with amazing ADOS in their communities on a day-to-day basis. I feel very, very fortunate and lucky. So thanks to you and to David and to everybody else.
Yeah. How about this? I have Egberto in the lobby. If you could stick around for 5 minutes,
yeah.
I want to ask that question. What is the role of a good ally? And he's smiling because he knows it's coming. So let's see.
Up,
let's see. There he is.
Hello. How
What's
you
up,
doing?
man?
How you doing, Tamara, David, and Chris? Great
What's up,
to be
brother?
here with you guys, man. How you guys doing?
I'm great.
Not to worry, Tamara. I am an ally. I am a 100% ally, no matter whether I disagree with the methods or not. That is what an ally is supposed to be. And I am a good, very good ally, my friend.
Yes.
You knew this. Hey, you knew this was coming, Egberto.
As soon as I saw Chris's face, I said, I am into the dungeon. How you doing, Chris?
Egberto, I appreciate you. We talked before here on this platform.
Yes.
And I appreciate your steadfastness. I appreciate your commitment to the struggle and to the fight. Right? It's not all, being an ally doesn't mean you have to agree with everything we say or do, right? And we also need to be challenged sometimes. There's benefit in sort of iron sharpening iron, steel sharpening steel, right?
Right.
And if we can't take constructive criticism, if our ideas can't be tested, if they can't be poked and prodded and challenged, then they're no good. Right.
Let me tell you something, Chris. I watched your passion. I watched what, I just came into the room and saw the passion with what you're doing. And I tell you one thing, if we all have the passion to do what we know we have to do, we would be a lot further. The thing about it is we have to somehow make that passion reflective onto others, because the thing about it is what you're fighting for is a must. I agree with that. What you're fighting for, well, I shouldn't say what you're fighting for. I should say what we are fighting for is a must. We're going to take a lot of different paths, but the thing about it is always knowing that there's somebody that's going to have your back, that's going to make sure nobody come and take it. I think that is what's important. And when I talk about being an ally and hoping that I have allies, that's what I'm talking about.
And if I might interject, there's a group called the Indigenous American Movement in Mexico, and they have rejected that whole concept of allies. They say, we don't want allies, we want accomplices.
I like that.
I like that.
I love that, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm an accomplice then.
Yeah. So
that's right.
I really think that sums up, and they actually have an argument that says that there is this allies industrial complex that's out there.
Okay.
That is making money off of this.
Oh yeah. Oh, I like this. Yeah.
The next part of their slogan is abolish the Allies' industrial complex.
Wow.
That is something to be explored. I think
Yes.
I actually think I understand that, because you go to Washington, D.C. and you see all these think tanks and well orchestrated groups that, you're right, David, that's what they're doing. And Tamara, you know that we see them every year at Daily, at Netroots and all these other places. So it's not something that we haven't actively seen, you know?
And all of the academics who write books about the issues, and then the what do you call it? The leaders of workshops, and and diversity trainings. I mean, this is corporate. This is really corporate business.
Let me jump in real quick, David. Chris, you have to go, because I know we only have.
Yeah, I gotta go. I gotta get to down to the office. But appreciate you both. I appreciate you all, David and Egberto. Appreciate you as always, as well, Tamara. We'll be in touch, obviously. But thank you all for your time, and thank you for helping me learn and understand better. Within the first couple hours of me getting up this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day, Chris. Thank you. ADOS 100.
Power to the people.
All right, Egberto, thank you for being a good ally.
Well, I am going to listen to our brother David right now. Brother David said I need to stop being an ally and I must become an accomplice. So, Tamara, I am officially your accomplice.
Yes.
But do you need me to national news? Here is the thing. El Señor Biden goes into either North Carolina, I think it's South Carolina, to campaign. It's South Carolina, and he goes and he meets with a whole bunch of Latinos and others. And they said, hey, under President Obama, there was a whole lot of deportations and all of that. Some of them not necessarily for crimes, but all kinds of people got deported. Will you, on your first day, commit not to do that? And Biden, in his Trumpian voice, says, no. He says, no, I will deport felons. I will deport. And look, what Biden is saying is not necessarily wrong. In other words, if there is a illegal, and if it's an undocumented person, that person is coming killing Americans and undocumented alike. Yes, it's okay to deport that person, but the insensitivity and the patriarchy with which and he commanded the room, no, I won't do that, I will do X, Y, Z, is what really stood out. He wanted to look like Trump, and it was evident he was not talking to Latinos. He was talking to the white working class that the Democratic Party will kill themselves over, instead of going ahead into the barrios, the ghettos, and Appalachia and find votes where they really are ready to be given. So I wanted to bring that up to say, I want all folks that are listening to your station right now, Tamara, but specifically Black and brown folk that are listening to your station, not to fool yourself into believing that because Obama picked Biden, that he picked him for, Biden had a very good record with people of color. No, Biden was picked because El Señor Obama needed to ensure his right flank. He needed to ensure that he was going to get a cross-section of the racist vote in America. And how did we know that was accomplished? Because in Pennsylvania, when a few people were interviewed, there was one particular interview where this Obama canvasser goes to a woman's home, a family's home, and says, who are you voting for? The woman, I don't know why, turns around to her husband. White woman turns around to her white husband and says, honey, who are we voting for? And Tamara, forgive the word I'm going to use right now. David, forgive the word I'm going to use right now, but I need to do it for impact. The husband called and shouted out to the woman, said, tell them we are voting for the nigger. And at that point, I knew Obama had accomplished his task. Biden had accomplished his task. And that is a Biden who is running for president, who people have falsely believed that he was chosen on the Obama ticket for anything other than to bring the cross-section Biden is still being asked to bring into the Democratic Party. Thank you.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and I think also, Egberto, that's a really important insight for everybody that is out there, struggling with these issues. The thing is that what it is a profoundly pessimistic interpretation of what is going on politically today. First of all, it assumes it's a stereotype of European American working people. All right, that's the first thing. It's a stereotype, as Michael Moore says,
I agree.
a stereotype of the working class, which is if you were looking at a typical working class person in this country today, it would be, as Michael Moore says, a 30-year-old African
Black woman. Yes.
So that's part of what we're talking about. But it's not only is it a stereotype, it says that European American working people are stuck. They are that we can't. The only thing that we can do is appease them, right? And appease not them, but appease their worst, instincts and worst. And that anecdote that you told, which I've heard many times, has really within it a double-edged sword, right, Egberto? I mean,
Yes.
On the one hand, he's using the N-word. On the other hand, he's voting for Obama.
Right.
So
David, I wanted to say that was very insightful of you, right? Because it is so important. You said something there that I think you especially needs to promote, in my humble opinion, and that is somehow believing that these people are stuck in that place. But the problem is the plutocracy wants them stuck in that place so
Right.
that they can manipulate both sides however they need to do it. So your insight is right spot on as far as these people are good people too. And Tamara, don't knock me for saying this, but I've actually encountered nice racists that after you have spoken and engaged them, they're like, I can't believe I was that way. I was just misinformed. You mean you put your pants on like me? You mean you care about your family like I do? You mean, but it is their job to not promote that, in my humble opinion, that is.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that that often what it comes down to is that there are a bunch of Trumpian bullies that are out there, many of whom are in a higher income and status bracket than most European American working people are, and they are the ones who can lord it over the real poor, the real poor whites, because they're the ones who are the ones who hire the poor whites. They're the ones who are the ones who are in the banks lending the money, or selling those double wide trailers. That a lot of so-called white trailer trash live in. Those double wide trailers are not homes. They don't what do you call it, increase in value.
Right.
They are
Good
like
point.
they are like automobiles. They depreciate.
Yes, yes.
And on top of that, you don't own the land that double wide is on. You've got to pay rent to the trailer park. So there's a lot of things that are going on in poor white communities that are really not very well understood by white people like me, who own their own home and have a profession, even though my profession was proletarianized. I mean, I tell you, I just got offered a job, part-time teaching job for $2,100 for the course.
Imagine that. Who can live on that?
I have a PhD. I have written a book. I've published a book by a prominent academic press, Johns Hopkins University Press, 7 journal articles and 25 years experience. And that's that's what I can command on the job market, right? So when you think about that, that level of exploitation, you really have to consider. I mean, it's sad. It's really sad. And on top of that, I think it's also necessary for European Americans to realize that they are not being promoted by this system.
Right.
The only thing that's happened, and this is what I mean by thinking and acting white, is that in comparison to African Americans, to immigrants, to ADOS in particular, they are, quote, better off.
Yes.
But not, they haven't escaped from the system of exploitation.
But David, that is powerful. I mean, people being able to say, at least I am not Black. At least I am not Latino. At least I am not. That is a powerful thing when you think you are powerless.
Yeah.
Just know that, well, at least you have power over something.
And that's an important distinction that I keep on, trying to emphasize, is that there's a real difference between power over and power with.
Exactly.
Power with is really the only way that working people have any power at all. In other words, solidarity, acting as accomplices to one another, and seeing that having power over somebody else is a way of relinquishing your own power as a working person.
So true. So true.
So, Egberto, before we let you head out, did you watch those Democratic debates?
Oh, why did you ask? I watched Comedy Central. Yes, I did. I blogged about it, and especially blogged about the most important part of the debate to me was the spin room. And when I watched so many Republicans running as Democrats in that spin room, I had to reestablish several of them on my faileddemocrats.com website, because that's what they are. And at first I said I would be a bit more measured with some of these candidates. I think it's a clear and present danger if we stay too measured with some of these candidates, because otherwise ADOS is dead and many other things are dead with some of these candidates. And with that, my dear.
Yes, you can find Egberto Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Periscope, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. This man is everywhere. Politics Done Right, Egberto.com. Egberto Willies.
Thank you so kindly. And by the way, folks, don't let her fool you. All those things that she just named for Politics Done Right, it applies to Tamara for Georgia as well. So check it out. Have a good one.
Thank you, Egberto. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Egberto. Take care.
All right. Miss Robbie's here. She knows what went on at that debate. Robbie, it's a little dark, honey. Are you sitting in the dark room? Can you hear us and see us?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. Hi.
Yeah, it's there. That's better. You were very dark. Yeah. How are you this morning?
I was sitting in the dark room.
Sitting in the dark room. Those Democratic debates. You're right there in the neighborhood. What happened, Robbie?
Well, interestingly enough, it was held at Tyler Perry Studios, and there's 2 entry points to Tyler Perry Studios, the 17 Sound Studios dedicated to Oprah and just amazing people. One side is on East Point and the other side is in City of Atlanta proper. And I have never seen the City of Atlanta side open. We've done some footage of that, but it was open for the Democratic debate. There was a police car with blue lights, I guess, monitoring. There was security, and the gates were open on the Atlanta side. So the people
That was probably VIP. That was probably the VIP entrance, Robbie.
I don't know, but it was really interesting because there was an article in the AJC about Tyler Perry and the Democratic debate. And one of our local media folks, Dominique Huff with Home News Rules, said, you know, this will be good because people will be able to see. And I actually told him, well, not really, because the East Point side is all cleaned up. It's the Atlanta side that's not. He was like, oh, yeah, but then they did open up the Atlanta side. And when I drove by, that's obviously the community of Oakland City, which just in the last 2 years has increased in income with gentrification of over $15,000 to $18,000, which is huge. Huge. Like every home over there is being flipped if it's not being held. And really, even though it was dark, when those people came out, they would have seen all the houses that are boarded up on Campbellton Road, all the blight, and the houses actually, they had doors open. So they're not even secure at all.
So I hope they got a good view of that. Those that were, I think that was probably a VIP entrance. I'm just assuming, guys. I don't know, but I'm just saying I hope they got a nice tour of what's really happening as they were approaching that beautiful.
You know, it's interesting. I was listening as much as I could to the show earlier in between work, and I heard David talking, you know, about, forgive me, I'm not, about white people and, you know, what white people need to do. And then I also heard the ADOS guests talking, you know, to some degree in terms of, you know, Black collective, you know, community, et cetera. And it's fascinating because when I think about the Tyler Perry scenario and the people going in and out, there's a constant theme here. And I wasn't able to hear the whole show, so I apologize if this is repetitive or not congruent. But, you know, if we look at white people all together, they're not just all together. And neither are Black people. Because the Black people going inside and out of Tyler Perry's, who are very, very affluent, are very different than the Black people who are living in Oakland City of a lower income, you know, and I heard the ADOS guests from California stating that some municipalities are looking at monies being directed at the, you know, from the local community level, which I think is a great idea. However, in Atlanta, that would backfire and did backfire. Because based on the system we have, you know, the MPU structure, neighborhood planning unit in City of Atlanta proper, created by Maynard Jackson, the late Maynard Jackson, we allow those monetary dues at the neighborhood association level. And that's how our gentrifiers have overtaken the agenda at City Hall. And it's actually been very costly to the city as a whole, because now we pay for the consequences of that poor planning, that non-inclusive planning, with an affordability crisis, with a homelessness crisis, with a rise in crime. In fact, the AJC had an article today that Atlanta Housing Authority just settled $1.3 million on the former Housing Authority head, Renee Glover, based on just problems with the Reid administration. And there's a lot of speculation too in terms of this upcoming election and what Republicans and Democrats are planning on doing, and how maybe there may be even some manipulation.
Robbie, there is a new bill that AOC and Sanders have introduced in the House and the Senate on public housing. Have you seen anything about it? It's really interesting and exciting bill. You know, they want to rehabilitate the remaining public housing in the country, which we're losing at the rate of about 10,000 units a year. I think there are, 190,000 that are left. You know, public housing has been demolished all over the country, but nowhere more aggressively than in Atlanta. And so, there's some, in the 1996 Olympics, that was one of the sort of hidden agendas of remaking Atlanta, was the demolishing of a huge amount of public housing.
Right.
And what Sanders and AOC are proposing is rehabilitating and revaluating. You know, in other words, making public housing more valuable. You know, and also to make it energy efficient, which it already is. So, in other words, more sustainability in housing and high density housing is far more energy efficient than than these sprawling suburbs.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. In fact, they're two of my favorite candidates. You know, Bernie was in Atlanta. I love AOC. It's hard. I mean, you either love her or the opposite.
Right.
The thing with public housing, though, is that, and I do like what they're introducing. It's necessary, and everything that you stated is absolutely accurate historically. I would expect nothing less from you. But with public housing and rentals, it does not address the generational wealth gap. It allows access, you know, where we can have mixed income communities and people don't have to travel an hour to get to work, but it does not correct the generational wealth gap where that's rooted in real estate, really. You know, to your point, David, which is, you know, obviously ADOS and the reparations, which, you know, I'm for. Really, I chuckled listening, because when Tamara asked you, what do white people need to do? You were like, they, and I was like, that was hilarious that you step out of that equation, you know, from that position, which I found that fascinating. But the problem, honestly, in my opinion, as someone who's, you know, privileged, who can pass for white, you know, in certain circles, is really that we do not teach history. And that I think a lot of, you know, maybe there should be, you know, a semi-discussion on, you know, white people who know history and white people who don't, because it's very difficult to not acknowledge, you know, the inequity if you truly know history. I mean, and know that it's an impossibility for people to expect Black people specifically, you know, who came out of slavery, obviously, which is the whole premise of the ADOS movement, you know, especially after the Black codes, where people could be arrested, you know, for not having a job, and then the consequential mass incarceration, war on poverty, you know, and so on and so on. It's this constant trauma on trauma that Michelle Alexander speaks to in her book, I forget, The Next Level of Jim Crow. But in Georgia specifically, our, you know, elected officials that ran this city for years, even Senator Isaacson, were heavy in real estate. And Georgia at one time was 70% incarcerated labor. You know, that's what we made our money on. And I say we because I'm a Georgia taxpayer, you know, now, even though where I was born. So I think the premise here is, when white people were building their wealth through real estate, which was allowed through redlining and assisted through the government, right? And then this, at the same time, what MLK spoke about, when white people were being provided lands, which helped build businesses, Black people were getting arrested for not having a job, just coming out of slavery, and then going through the war, the mass incarceration, the war on drugs, the war on poverty, you know, in their communities. So, you know, one group went this way and one group went this way. And now to say, well, here we are, we're all even, you know, and we're going to do a lot of rentals. No, you know, no. And that needs to be understood.
That's a very good point, Robin.
And acknowledged. So to Bernie and to AOC, awesome, but we still need the reparation period.
You nailed it, Robbie. You nailed it.
Yeah, I'm get nailed.
No, but I mean, you hit it right on the head. Like, that is the absolute truth. There, you know, there's no way for us to pull ourselves up.
The whole bootstrap, and the worst component is when we have elite Blacks standing at the forefront with a ton of, you know, white people behind them, or people who look white, you know, or when the Cubans jump in and say, these people just need to work. It's like, okay, you did it, but come on, you know, get past yourself, get past, like, and I am not the best person to talk about this, because I tend to take things personal. And I see people when they behave, in my opinion, a-hole ways. I'm like, oh, well, you're an a-hole then. You know, and I don't know how else. So I'm not the most mature on that. And I will acknowledge that.
Robbie's from New York. She'll fight you. Just joking, but.
Well, you know, I don't think people realize, you know, the premise of the personal is political. When you sit and take that position, you endanger people.
Yeah.
You know, you are part of a collective that is causing danger in crime. Like when I'm walking to the MARTA station or wherever, when I'm going innocently to get gas, even though I'm not an a-hole, and somebody thinks I'm a white person and resents me, you know, or whatever, because of what they might perceive, even though I don't behave that way, my actions are not congruent with that. Now you're endangering me because of your ignorance and your ego. And that's not okay with me. Now I got to pay for an affordability crisis and a homelessness crisis and a rise and so on. And we're subsidizing developers and we have corruption because you can't process white privilege when you have no excuse not to, because you're educated enough or ill-educated where you can get the info now.
And we're at the top of the hour. I'm going to let you have that last word, Robbie. You can join us every single week right here on the broadcast. In January, everybody, we will be going to Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. Be prepared for our new day of broadcasting. Again, we'll be in January. We will be broadcasting on Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern. But I want to thank my trusty co-host, Mr. David, and Miss Robbie L. Caban for bringing it. Thank you, Mr. Egberto Willie's Politics Done Right. Thank you, Mr. Chris Lodson out of Sacramento, representing Sacramento ADOS and representing ADOS nationwide. I am Tamara Johnson-Shealy, your candidate for the United States Senate. See you guys next week.
Power to the people.